Hey, welcome everyone to the Analytic Mind podcast. I'm joined today by Aron Clymer, and I personally have only just met Aron, so I'm getting to know him as well. But Aron's got some amazing experience in the data world, runs his own business that's grown a lot over the last six or 7 years, I believe, and really excited to dive into all data related topics, from data engineering to visualization to distribution to all those great things, and see what Aron's up to. So Aron, why don't I just throw over to you, and maybe you can just expand on that a bit.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Sam, and nice to meet you, and thanks for having me on the show. I've just been in high tech and data for 25 years now, maybe a little more, and I'm fully enjoying running a consulting firm for the past, like you said, 6 or 7 years. I founded the company with the vision of being a full stack data engineering consulting firm, and our mission is really to empower our clients to get the most out of their data by self-service analytics as well as actionable analytics. At the end of the day, it's all about making a decision and taking an action and seeing a result. Otherwise, there's no point in doing anything we're doing. We're just, I think I'm a visionary because I started the company remote first 7 years ago, and now we're all remote, and nothing changed in our business model. We're excited for this ride. I love the technology that's out there in this space of modern cloud data stack. It's just a breath of fresh air from the 20-year ago solution to this problem. And so having a lot of fun.
Yeah, nice. And so, what's really been your background? I know from doing a little bit of research that you used to work at Salesforce in a pretty big role there. So, I'm sure that would be interesting just to dive into what you learned there and maybe what you did there.
Yeah, absolutely. The Salesforce was definitely a turning point in my career for data. So I founded and built the data team at Salesforce back around 2008 to 2016 timeframe, and was really surprised. Even when I got there, there were about 3,000 employees. There was already a public company. It was a pretty sizable company, largest cloud company in the world at the time, for sure, and arguably still one of them. But they just weren't leveraging data much, and so was able to come in there and really just see what was going on, and realize that the potential of data was so high, there, that I was really excited to gather. Eventually what we did is we gathered a whole product usage data set. So pretty much every feature that Salesforce delivers, every product, tracking all of that every day, and then servicing that back up to, first and foremost, product managers who need to understand their product strategy based on usage patterns, what features are working, what's not. But really more for the enterprise. So customer success really needed that data set to understand customer health. We actually built an early warning system, right, to predict customer attrition, make sure we can address unhealthy customers quickly. Sales, marketing needed this data set. So it was a really very enterprise data set. Enjoyed doing that. More so really not from the technology standpoint, but from the methodology standpoint. It was really fun to develop a methodology by which we just ensured that the data was actionable. We would spend a lot of time with stakeholders and end users understanding what is an actionable metric, what's really going to move the needle for you. Let's go measure that, and then let's figure out what we can do with it. So I enjoyed the methodology that we developed there as well, and then I've parlayed a lot of that into Data Climber, the business we have today. But prior to that, I've had a kind of circuitous career, I guess. I have 2 degrees in geology. So I started out in science, not even technology, and pivoted directly into technology. I mean, I'll show my age here. I was the dot-com boom, and really loved getting into high tech during that time and never looked back. So I've enjoyed my whole career from that time.
Nice. So many interesting things I'd like to dive into there. Some of the things you mentioned about how you can use data for increasing, for optimizing, for improving every aspect of what you do in the business was totally highlighted in some of the examples you gave, right? Like just really analyzing even new features that you're bringing out, making sure they're getting used, making sure that they're being used in the way that you thought that they would be, from when you decided to build it, to the attrition model, to early warning signals if someone is potentially going to churn. I mean, those are some truly interesting data related optimizations, like value you can generate from data, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I love about this field is I feel like there's so much low hanging fruit almost wherever you go. Um, you don't have to get complicated. I'll give you another quick story. When I started consulting, I was working for Uber, and little changes at a big company like that make big impacts, right? And so, just a simple idea of looking at automatically the top 5 marketing campaigns that are running in a day and the bottom 5, and truncating the bottom 5 and doubling down on the top 5, right? Just do some simple automatic ETL process that monitors that and changes campaign, the amount of money that's put into ad campaigns, made hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference in a short amount of time. So it's amazing how much you can find sometimes nuggets in the data that are very valuable and very easy to take advantage of.
Yeah, and a lot of them are just like not intuitive. In a lot of cases, they just take immersing yourself in the process, in the function that that is relevant to you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm in the data world too. I'm a data person, and see them everywhere. I mean, I see them within our own business. Because we do a lot online ourselves, and it's just measuring everything that everyone's doing on our platform, signups, churn. All of those things that even, I don't know, you're real on this, but I keep saying this. I think that even say 10 to just over 10 years ago, like a lot of this wasn't even possible. It was so difficult, so hard to actually do it at scale. But now, things have just remarkably changed for the better in the last 5-10 years. It's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, I've been blown away by the innovation. I mean, again, 10 years ago, my sort of rough math would say that a data project 10 years ago probably cost at least 5x, because you needed more people for sure to even implement a system and get it going, the care and feeding of it, the amount of extra work, because systems couldn't handle raw data. Like the data volume problem was still such a big deal, and performance, that you always had to aggregate your results, and you were doing aggregations upon aggregations upon aggregations to get to your final report or dashboard or insight. And that costs a lot of time and money and processing and people and everything. And broke a lot too, because you've got pretty large DAGs and pretty large, dependency to build those things. Whereas today, it's just a breath of fresh air. You can query raw granular data at scale and get answers pretty quickly. And you can skip a lot of that overhead from a data modeling perspective. Again, from just the personnel you need to hire to run, a system. And today you can stand up a full modern cloud data stack with just a couple people, and you can do most of what you need to do.
Yeah, easy. And I mean, even I would say, if you're a small to medium sized business, I mean, you can just do it with one person, honestly. Like if you've got someone who's savvy, like it's in a lot of cases, there's the ability now to even build what was very difficult 10 years ago. You could build it yourself with like Power BI. I mean, you don't even need a database in a lot of cases if you're just a small to medium sized business. It's pretty amazing. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that we at Enterprise DNA really try and showcase, is that, like, with a $20 subscription, and a innovative and creative way that you just manage your data, you can you do some pretty amazing things that you couldn't even dream of doing 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I still think though there's so many challenges we still have, right? Like you mentioned, yeah, you can spend $20 a month on a subscription or whatever and have data pretty quickly and not even have a database. And that does work to get started. And if you're an analyst, especially if their analyst is in your title, yeah, you're doing this all day, crunching data. But I'm always wrestling with this idea of the governance of that data and the single source of truth idea and cleaning it and making it a trusted data set, all that stuff, which gets really hard really fast as a company gets bigger. And you do want a data warehouse and you do want some governance around things. And you ideally want a data set that everybody can access. That's the same data set. And it's very, it's governed, it's very clean. It's somebody who knows what they're doing is really maintaining that data set and making sure it's not dirty. Doesn't have big problems. And then you got everything in one place. So that's a tough one. It's still a tough nut to crack. Kind of this balance between just letting everybody do everything, which I would argue Tableau, that was their business model, get one desktop installation at a time in a big corporation until everybody's using it. I think Power BI might be taking that same approach, right? Just get it into everybody's hands quickly. But then you could have this Wild West problem where everybody's doing the same thing over and over and there's no centralization of governance. I'm curious what
I can say, I can say with 100% confidence that's exactly what happens because this is the most common conversation that I have with customers we currently have, customers we're currently talking to. They Power BI and I'd say Tableau is sold as this self-service tool, which I do believe in, and I presume you do as well. But you need guardrails. Like you need to have a central plan. You need to have central governance because if you don't, then you just find yourself in exactly the same place you were with Excel, where everyone's off just doing their own thing, and there's just no single source of truth. There's no way to validate everyone's numbers that they're sending in. So it's a combination. It's a combination. It's having a centralized strategy and then empowering those analysts and those everyday users to be able to build within the bounds that the central team is governed. That's how I feel.
No, I agree completely. I want to democratize data. I want everybody to be able to have access to it. I think data should be a part of everybody's job. Whatever it is, there should be data involved. But you have to give them the tools and the structure so they don't shoot themselves in the foot. That's when I have the most fun. We had a client quite a few years back that I think is the quintessential story here of data modeling, because even if you gave the raw data access to everybody in the company, the raw data, nobody could query it because it was much too complicated to understand. It was a high tech company. Their product, their database, which would be the source of a lot of the data, was designed and it was overloaded in so many ways that you couldn't even tell what column meant, and you had to really model it to extract what you're trying to say. Here's the definition of a customer, here's a purchase, here's a product, even those simple things you couldn't derive. So I loved going in there we spent months modeling that data to the point where anybody in the company, it was dead simple, right? Make it analytics friendly, ready to go. And then everybody in the company can actually start to use it and actually find insights. But before that, there was about 2 people in a 300 person company that could query the data directly.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Is having that's actually just a common theme that I've learned over the last year or two, and a lot of it has been a function of the tools, because we're very focused on Power BI, obviously. And the tools within Power BI, the enterprise tools within Power BI have really been enhanced recently. So when I say enterprise, I mean things like the way you can engineer and architect your data has been vastly improved. But prior to a couple of years ago, there was just nothing. It was kind of just everyone had to build their own models and everyone had to build their own formulas. But now you can really centralize a lot of that to really scale what you're doing. And but following on from what you just mentioned, I think that is now more important than it has ever been. If you can centralize the overall sort of engineering piece, the architecture piece of what you're doing with all the nuanced data pieces that you've got around your business, if you can centralize that and scale it, that is the way that's the path you need to be on to get that more immersiveness throughout an organization around data. And so I wholeheartedly agree with your comments there. It's just absolutely essential, more essential than it's ever been now.
Yeah, I think, it works. You get to this point where all of a sudden it's ready enough. It's never perfect. It's ready enough. And all of a sudden 1,000 employees can access the data.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense. And you start to really see that culture change at the end of the day, which is what we're always shooting for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm interested to get your thoughts. Are you seeing that, within a business, right? There's lots of levers that you can push. There's a lot that, or pull to grow or to get more profitable, or whatever. Are you through your experience, have you, maybe Salesforce is a great example here. Do you feel like the analytics piece, the data area was the area where when you pulled the lever, that was where you could get the biggest gains?
Have definitely seen that in a lot of cases. I think once you go through the data journey at a customer, at a company, and you've spent the time to see what value you can get out of the data, you'll find that often you're going to drive a lot of revenue or cost savings, from that data. One good example, I definitely had one client early on who was just so worried about their business strategy overall. Like they produced a product. It was an add-on application to Salesforce. And they were, after about a year of operations, they really had no data to sort of understand how customers were really using the product. That's what we were brought in to help build. But before they had the answers, they had this sense that maybe the customers were using it in a completely different way than they intended. And they needed to pivot the company. Like it was to the point where they needed a different product. And I got all the data centralized for them and got a modern cloud stack. Spent only one day of doing analytics in real time with the leadership team. So because we finally had the data ready to go, we could ask any questions. We just started, they started asking all sorts of questions they'd had for years and getting answers. They couldn't believe how fast they were getting answers. It was this great moment. And they pivoted the entire product line because of that one day of analytics. So it can be a really powerful change to an entire strategy. It's usually not quite that dramatic. But yeah, we see it all the time. It was at Salesforce. I fundamentally believe that the data-driven aspect that we injected into the culture absolutely paid off on the bottom line. We have lots of stories. There's one story of creating a whole new product, not a product line, but a product within a product line because of an analysis we did. And that just definitely added to the bottom line there. So creating, I think data-driven results can really shape a company in so many different ways.
Yeah. And it's as you mentioned as well, it's not just increasing growth or revenue. It's saving time. It's reducing costs. I mean, all areas, like there's levers all throughout a business, right? Like, and data can really help with all of that. I mean, it's just that's just the reality. I mean, even for a fast growing company, having analytics of like how many people you're going to need and forecasting how many people you're going to need. I mean, that's even a really valuable insight as well, because that can be something that really holds back a business that has really significant growth potential.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing that internally as we try to figure out because growth is going pretty fast. But yes, there's a case study on our website about one of our clients saving $2 million in operational costs just by we implemented a system that looked at their products in the warehouse and which products were being left on the shelves too long. Sometimes they couldn't ship products because they were past the expiration date. Before they got shipped, these were so things like that. $2 million just in understanding what that problem was, addressing it, and fixing it. Again, not that complicated. Just takes the time and effort to look at your data and understand what the action is that you can take from it.
Yeah, totally. It's just everywhere. Question for you that would be, I'm sure, really interesting to me, but also others is, say you're a cloud, but you're an online business, or you've got a website, and you've mentioned that you've been able to extract a lot of the user data of your platform. So when you say that, like what actual data are you getting? Are you like looking at a heat map of how someone's moving around the website, or are you looking at how many hours, the time they're spending on the page? Like what's the accumulation of data that you can get out of that can actually really showcase value? Like you were mentioning that example where you where the Salesforce add-in, like what is the data that can really help?
Oh, there's so much. And all of the things you mentioned, absolutely. I think it's more about what's the question being asked, what's the business problem you're trying to solve for, because all of those apply to different business questions. Um, Thinking that one client I just mentioned that pivoted their product, the time spent on the app itself was really important. It was just a KPI that made a big business difference to them in terms of their strategy. So measuring that was critical. For something like Salesforce, where you've got, I mean, thousands of features, hundreds of products, and a very big suite of products, even the simplest data can be really helpful. So we spent a lot of time actually at Salesforce taking all of the raw data. So just to actually expand on your question, maybe a little bit about what kind of data in general, when you're measuring a high tech product, which almost every company has now, right? Almost every company has an app, mobile app. They always have a website. There's always a tech product to track. Um, Obviously, like every click is important. So logging every click and having all of the parameters associated with that event in a log and making sure that that's accurate and clean. That's step one. And there's a whole modeling approach to that that we do a lot of. That's that actually is a fascinating topic to me, because I think you can actually just put that log in a data warehouse table and that's it, and just query it live to answer a zillion questions you might have about what are the last three things that somebody does before they buy, or what are the attribution models for marketing. I mean, all sorts of amazing stuff. So anyway, click stream analysis, and then the other kind of data is all the state data. It's like state data from a database usually. So in Salesforce, for instance, what's the status of the organization you have in Salesforce? Is it active? Is it is it not? Is it a sandbox org or whatever? So there's lots of different state data you want to get, and you want to marry the state data with the usage data. And there's also usage data that comes out of databases that you're just not tracking in a log necessarily, or it's just not all the data about that is tracked in the log. So usually we're getting data from both database sources directly and from log files, and then modeling that so that it's easy to analyze in a cloud data warehouse.
Yeah. Just hearing you say that, there is just unlimited opportunities to analyze that, right? Like, I don't even think, is there any companies that provide a service that does that well? Like that is a blue ocean opportunity, really.
I mean, that's kind of why we're in business, because there's not a product for this. You have to really model the data as best you can. I mean, there are products to help you with the tracking of data, right? I mean, Segment tracks data. There's lots of Snowplow, lots of companies that will help you track all those events, put them in a data warehouse. But you still got to model it. And actually, the other quick thing I'll mention about this clickstream analysis is that it's kind of amazing. Again, you'd imagine you're capturing so much metadata and data about everything, but often I find for impactful business outcomes, most of the data is less important for the major decisions. It's really just the minimum amount of data you need to understand what's going on. So just as an example, again, Salesforce, thousands of features. You're tracking all these clicks through a specific feature, but it's not so important necessarily what click came first or second or what exactly happened. It's just important that that person was using that feature that day. That'll answer a lot of questions for you. So we would spend a lot of time generating a sort of simple data set that was literally a list of features and users as a big matrix, you can think of it, and what features that they use every hour or every day. And that's basically it. From there, you can derive a lot of insights around the product, what companies are, leaning toward what features, what kind of companies are those? Why are they doing that? Is it different industries use Salesforce in a different way? It's tons of sort of questions you can come up with and then answer with that simple data set. And just understanding, daily active users, weekly active users, that kind of stuff, but slicing it by some 5, 6, 7 key dimensions, by, industry, by region, all that good stuff. You can just tons of insights.
Yeah. And an interesting question to follow that, and I'm sure this is probably a part of what you do is how do you know what matters? How as a business do you decide? Because all of that is really interesting, right? But like how do you how do you decipher the signal from the noise? So that's probably the way to state it, right?
Right. Again, I find that a lot of data practitioners, we love data. We just want to dive in. We want to look at data and build data and analyze data. But it really comes down to the business question you're trying to solve first, right? So you really have to understand the business problem that you're addressing. And I find that a lot of times, even leaders at a company aren't necessarily clear on exactly what their goal is. So I think the first and foremost thing to do is really focus on your business goals and really spend a lot of time thinking about what exactly are you trying to solve for. So if that can be clear at the highest level, let's say could be anything, right? You're trying to solve for customer attrition or customer acquisition or profitability, cost saving, whatever it is, be very clear on what that is. And then specifically what KPIs would measure that and what metrics you need to derive in the first place to get an answer. And then you'll know what data you need and you'll know what matters from sort of the forest of data, which nuggets and pieces you need to get. So drive it all from the business. Don't just assume you can just attack a data set and just look for interesting things. It's driven from a business problem will be the best way to get a business outcome, which of course is the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. So, question, where do you actually fit into, like, in terms of what you do? Do you come in at ground zero, or are you just trying to fit in the engineering piece? What's sort of your wheelhouse?
Yeah, it's actually pretty wide spectrum. I mean, anything having to do with full cloud data stack is us. It can be a greenfield, project for us where a customer has never had a system before. We're currently working, for instance, with the Big Ten Conference, which is a collegial sports conference in the US. And there really was no system. So it's fun to kind of design those things from ground up, from scratch. And it's not just a simple system for just the conference. It also includes all the schools they work with. There's 14 universities. So we're trying to build a system that really 15 entities are going to play in with data security, but a single source of truth, a single view of the customer. In that case, it's the fan. Their customer are the fans of their sports. So a 360-degree view of the fan, if you will, or a single source of truth for the fan with a deduplication. So you have a golden fan record, master record of the fan. So that's fun. So we'll do a data strategy and a full solution architecture and then implementation. And then, a lot of other companies we work with, they have a system. They even have a data team. We're an augmentation to that team. We're extra capacity. We'll take a couple projects and get those off their plate so they can move much faster. And again, it could be anywhere in the stack. Could be a lot of backend data modeling and ETL, we call it, extract, transform, and load work. Or it could be front-end visualization and analytics type of stuff where you're really talking about dashboarding and visualizations or embedding dashboards in public-facing, areas. You can share data with customers, so forth.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Must be fascinating working in some of these the intellectual challenge of building something up from from wherever you plug in. That must be really interesting.
Yeah, it's fun. The most creative part really is back to the data modeling side of things. I feel like there's no one data modeling approach to any problem. And I think you've touched on this in other episodes, right? Where modeling is just kind of an art sometimes, and there's no great modeling courses out there necessarily, or books. You have the Kimball book, you have, but today you don't, modeling is quite simplified by the power of some enterprise data warehouses like Snowflake, where you can have low grain data, which is what I love. Like, keep the grain, keep the data. Every time you aggregate data, you lose information. So don't lose information. Just keep the raw grain, if you will. That's the difference between raw and modeled, right? Raw is raw and really hard to understand and read for most people. But modeled is cleaned, interpreted, made clear, but still low grain. Every single little event, every single little click on a product, whatever it is. I want to keep that granularity there so you can ask any question. But anyway, so the modeling though, sometimes I still think that's an art. It's an art, a lot of what we do, right? Because you got to kind of pick the right modeling approach depending on the kind of data, the business solution you're looking for, and so forth. So it's
what you bring up there is a really interesting point. And two things comes to mind is, one, I completely agree on the modeling piece, in that I almost feel like the modeling methodology is kind of outdated. I really do. I mean, some people will hammer me on that, but those were books and ideas that were like 15 to 20 years old. I mean, the way that you can model now is just so different. Like the way that you can, like from my Power BI lens, right? The way that you can architect a deployment of Power BI, it's almost it's so different. It's so different. It's not like you need this one size fits all model. I mean, it can be very tailored to a workspace or tailored to a Power BI app that you're building. Like it's kind of different. I have actually been trying to think deeply about this and trying to come up with we have this new concept called Enterprise DNA, big ideas that we're trying to come up with. And to me, one of the big ideas is just a new methodology around just modeling and architecture. I haven't quite landed on it yet, but that's kind of the idea. Like Kimball for the or a star schema for today. Like is there a sort of a new name? Is there a new methodology? Is there a new way to think about it? Because when I'm doing a lot of our analysis internally, I'm doing something completely different to what has been advised in the past. Like this is not a standard model, right? But I haven't quite nailed the visual of it, because you want to try and create some branding or some name that just sort of showcases what it is immediately. So I haven't quite nailed that, but I really think that there is an opportunity for something new, for some new ideas in this space. I don't know what you think.
Oh, I'd love to hear more about that at some point. Yeah, no, I love it. I agree. I think that we need to have a guidebook for data professionals out there, so they have a better sense of how they can approach modeling. Just 4 or 5 patterns that are really common that make sense with today's technology and the way we want to approach things. A lot of query tools out there these days are live querying directly against a data warehouse. And so you want to make sure you've modeled it in a way that makes sense for lots of different people. And I kind of go back to this. I just remembered the term of this event stream modeling I was referring to before. There's a open source project out there called Activity Stream. And Activity Stream is just a specific way to look at event data. And it actually is very, I just find it fascinating, because what it says is every event could be from, any product or any action that somebody takes on anything. And there's actually only about 10 or 15 columns you would need to track to answer 80%, maybe even 90% of the questions you have about that thing. It kind of goes back to what I said before. You don't have to know the 100 other things about details about, let's say, an order on your website. If you have an e-commerce site, you can get a lot of business answers to just knowing how many orders and maybe the kind of products, right? But that's about it of what's selling, over time. And you don't need to understand too much about the details of that order. So you just track you track it all, but in one table, you track the important things like the timestamp, the user ID, if you have one, some basic stuff that you really need to track. And then you can go back and you're done with your model, right? There is no modeling. You just throw it into a log table like that. And then if you can query it correctly, that's a little bit of the trick. But you can answer all these questions and basically do all your pivots and all the loops the hoops you go through in SQL to get an answer. In SQL at runtime, you do all that.
Yeah. And also my other finding on just modeling in general is that the model, because there's also like different places you can build a model now. Like you can have a core model, which might sit underneath a lot of your very granular data or your big data sets, but then you might have like sub models off that take a query from that core model, and then you build a model around that sits underneath a Power BI report, for example. Right. So it's kind of, I haven't got a name for it just yet, but there's that sort of thing. And even like with, because Power BI and Tableau and ClickView, I mean, they're all sort of new ways of distributing and visualizing data, right? Like it's not like we're just dealing with Excel or tabular data sets where we're just like querying and querying and querying. We're actually building unique models and dashboards and reports. And sometimes they can just be one table. Sometimes they can be just a couple of tables. But obviously, this is all being collected from they could be collected from a central model. So it's like hub and spoke. I mean, that's maybe a terminology, but that's a bit dated. But I'm sure there's sort of like a sort of new, more modern term for it. But that's kind of my idea. That's kind of the idea that I think is quite a big one.
Yeah, no, I think that's always going to be required, especially in that Power BI world where maybe you can, you're going to need to do that for lots of different reasons. And you're right, you might need to create you definitely do need to create separate models to answer different business questions. Sometimes it's just necessary. I have another really good example from one of our recent clients where we wanted to track customer retention or attrition, the flip side of that. But it wasn't that simple. They had a SaaS business model. They were selling 30-day subscriptions, and it was for small business. So everything was usually purchased over with a credit card, and they had thousands and thousands of customers. Well, just because somebody's credit card doesn't go through on a specific day does not mean you lost a customer, right? It could just be that their credit card was declined, and they're going to go fix that. So the question was, how do you define a customer attrition? And we decided it was going to be okay. It was going to be you wait an extra 30 days past the time when a payment was due. If they still haven't paid in 30 days, okay, then we're going to call them a customer, attrition. But then they could come back, and then we'll call that customer resurrection, and 4 or 5 labels for a particular customer.
Yeah.
Well, you want to model that over time and trend it every day and look at what attrition was like on a daily basis for the last 2 years. You have to create a separate table really that pre-calculates all these things, basically snapshots the world every day and figures out what's the status of each customer on that day. And then you can do some really cool analytics on top of that. But you had to build that model. So there's plenty of times that's important. On the flip side though, I'm a big fan of this where modern cloud stacks are going, which is get live queries against a very granular table in a cloud data warehouse. You can have billions of rows of very granular data, live query. And in that live query, you do a lot of modeling, essentially. That query itself becomes the model because the processing is available now for that to happen. Again, 10 years ago, no way. But with some of the distributed computing now that allows the amount of processing available that's distributed and the tools out there that will let you model in a way that's at execution time, essentially, is pretty interesting too. Do you do that with Power BI, with like DAX? Is that kind of what happens? Is that at runtime that gets executed?
No. Yes, DAX does layer, is a layer that can do that. But what really does that is Power Query. So Power Query is the sort of transformation engine. It sits in the back of like a Power BI desktop model. But where the real gains are and what I've really discovered in the last 6 months is they've created this concept called data flows, and data flows is Power Query in the cloud. And so this is a tool which can do all your ETL work for you when you query, and you're amazed at the simplification you can create around your ultimate model, if you even need a model at all. Based on that querying work that you do. And it all happens quite seamlessly in the cloud. You push schedule, you refresh, and it just happens. I mean, you're right. Like it just wasn't even possible 5 years ago, but now it's all just can be done. And while you sleep, just while you're it can all happen very quickly. So it's actually quite amazing. I mean, in our business, I've got maybe 50 data flows, like unique queries that are querying all sorts of data, database data, Excel files, just bringing it all centralized and then cleaning it all up at once, without me even noticing. I don't have to do anything. So, that is quite powerful, right? Very, very powerful.
Yeah. Oh, the automation is critical to scale. And I love building these very automated systems that are very smart too. If you can build in an extra layer of trust on all of that, so that everything from jobs retry automatically. They heal themselves if they can. Maybe even sometimes we build what we call trust dashboards for a company, so they can see the status of the system and see the status of the data. And if there is a problem, at least they're alerted to it and they know there's an issue right now. So maybe I shouldn't run that report, right now because the data is actually bad.
Yep.
But at least right? So you're not going and giving bad data to your boss.
Yeah. What's your usual tech stack that you're using?
So we are almost 90%, maybe more, Snowflake data warehouse or data cloud, they would like me to say, data platform. And then we use a variety of tools on top of that for data transformation and modeling. Fivetran is typical. DBT is very typical. Matillion is another one. These are all just modeling tools and also data pipeline tools. Then there's reverse ETL tools that get the data back out into systems. And then business intelligence, layer on the top. So the BI tools we use are quite broad. We do some Power BI, Tableau, Looker. Sigma Computing is a big one that we've been using more recently. They have a very modern architecture that I like. It was much like Looker, where it's all live SQL queries against your data warehouse at runtime. Sigma Computing has a spreadsheet interface, which is very user friendly, so people intuitively know how to use it. But it's really a BI tool. It looks like you're using Excel, but it's really connected to your billion row table, under the covers, and so you can just page through data forever, and it's pretty nice. So we use those are typically the partners we have. Atlan is a data governance company that we use a lot for governance and data discovery and all that good stuff. That's typically where we're playing right now.
Is Atlan, that's kind of like a data catalog type product. Is that right?
Yeah, they do everything from cataloging, some governance, a lot of different features in there.
Right.
Yes. The idea is to have some sort of easy way to become aware of what data you have, definitions of what you have, and understand how to query it and understand what's popular, all sorts of stuff.
Nice. When you're dealing with potential customers or customers, where are the areas, not only from the implementation point of view, but do you feel like there's a ton of value that you add or that can be added from just showcasing what's possible? Is the awareness out there amongst your customers or potential customers of what is actually possible?
That's a really good question. There is a decent amount of awareness in the sense that most of our clients do understand what is possible and what they can do. I mean, they've been pretty good at visualizing what they're looking for, not really understanding the technology, not understanding the approach, but understanding again what they're looking for from a business standpoint. It's a good question though. We should do some more even demonstrations around what is possible. I would love to do that. So haven't edited. We do that for some things. We definitely have some prototypes we will demo for people or show some of the things we've been working on internally to show them. And we definitely explain a lot, but in terms of demonstration and actually showing it, not as much as I would like to.
Right. And what are some other really interesting things you've done over the last few years? What are some interesting projects, some interesting outcomes? Be great to get more of an idea of what you've been up to and what's possible, really.
Yeah. I think we just have such a variety of clients that are always interesting to work with, and every single one of them, the story is getting them onto a data transformation, onto our digital transformation on a modern cloud data stack, and just seeing what they can do with it. So I love just getting that data set ready to go, training end users, and letting go off to the races. We've been fortunate to be in a lot of sports, involved with a lot of sports teams in the country. We are working with 5 or 6 major league football teams in the NFL, and also the NFL league proper. Some major league baseball teams. I mentioned the Big Ten. So the sports industry is really interesting. They need a lot of help. They're definitely behind the times, and we're trying to get them all up to a modern approach to data, and it's working. It's really fun to see that go. I mean, to go from kind of what you mentioned before, 10 years ago, there's so many things you couldn't even do because you just didn't have the time or the resources. It just took too long
Yeah.
without some of the modern approaches. And we see that in a lot of sports. They just couldn't do things very well. Um, Simple things like one team we helped were elated when on the day of a major marketing campaign, they could measure how many net new fans they created in their database that day, right? Because of that campaign, just things like that. Just couldn't do that before because it took too long. It was all in files and spreadsheets and it took 3 days to compile the data and they just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, we're in a lot of health tech, fintech, insurance, banks. So e-commerce, really a wide swath of industries and companies, and they're all doing their fascinating things in their own right. And we love going along for the ride and helping them realize how they're going to get there with data and how data is going to be. Again, we go for culture change at these companies and make sure they're using it to the maximum.
Yeah. And within the sports area, are you mainly dealing with the actual in sport, event analysis that you could do, or it's sort of more around the operations, the sports operations that you're working with?
Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me. I should have pointed that out. It always comes up. It's more around the operations. So all the sports teams have two businesses really. There's the player side, and then there's the operations side. So sales and marketing and selling tickets. The operations side is nearly always what we're involved in. So it's not the Moneyball, super sexy data in that sense. Although we're starting to work with the NFL on that side of the business. But I'm always fascinated too by this. The player side of the business, I understand they have very sensitive data. Player data is very, very sensitive data, and they want to wall it off from the rest of the world, of course. But even within their own organization, the operations side has very little access to the player side, or there's not even much communication. They operate as very independent entities. And yet there's a lot of data actually from the player side that the operations side can use. Simple example is, marketing would love to just push out a social post about, the fastest run of the season, or, stats about some of the players that are, not proprietary. It's fine. Just push that out. But
Yeah.
it's hard for them to go and get that data. They have to spend probably half the day to, figure out how to submit a request and have the person get back the data. I'm always pushing teams to see if they can consolidate on one stack and just have, gated rules. And there's definitely security you can set up to make all that secure. At the same time, expose data very easily that you want to expose to the rest of the company and make it self-service. I always go back to automation, self-service. That's the way you're really going to get this on a daily basis, get this impact of data.
Yeah. You would have to think with some creative thinking that there is a ton of customer engagement, more in customer engagement that you can get out of some of that sports teams data sets, like that actual real world. I've always been fascinated, particularly around sports, how you could build engagement within games, right? Like say you're sitting at a stadium. I mean, I think I've heard the term like the connected stadium before, right? Like where you can actually see some of the key data points within a match, like while you're at the stadium. And you could see how hard a tackle was, or you could see how fast a run was, or how far a throw was, and you could sort of actually like track it in real time. But it could be like your own unique customer journey. It doesn't have to be what everyone's seeing on the big screen.
Right.
I mean, there's just like endless opportunities there, right? Like be able to see the game within the game, like that from a customer perspective would be huge for engagement. Huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've seen some of the technology there and I love it. And of course, I'm sort of drooling at the data that will come out of that too, right? Because then if you understand which fans are interested in which stats or which players or, what experience they're looking for in the game, now you can customize that engagement even farther, right? You give them even more of what they want. So yes, that's pretty fascinating where this is going. And I think, I don't know what the stat is exactly, but something like 90% of fans never come to a game. They're whatever couch fans. They're watching it at home. There's a huge audience that has been hard to engage with, for sports teams. But that kind of technology brought to in their house, either through their mobile devices or their TV, could really, really change the game. Is like literally about how you engage with fans.
It's really only a matter of time, isn't it? Like it's going to happen. There'll be some creative organization or group that figures that out. Because I even think, so much is being democratized everywhere. And then if we just look at sports, you could empower a whole new generation of sportscasters on Twitch or YouTube with like new and interesting information. And, it doesn't all have to be through this one centralized place. And that's how you could build a bigger customer base, there's just endless opportunities for innovative organizations working with that sort of data and that sort of information, making it more available,
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a lot of this tech is there now. It's more just, not being invested in just yet, not pulling the trigger on it, but it'll come.
Yeah. And I'm interested to you're very deep in the industry. What's your what are some of the things that you're really excited about? Like what we've seen so much change in the last 5 years. What do you think is on the cards for the next 5 to 10 years?
I think what most excites me in this space is that, and I've been doing data warehousing and analytics for 20 years plus. It's always been analytics and data warehousing. It's always been backward looking, analytics of data, sort of internal analytics. Yes, you can predict the future with data, which is really exciting, and you can do some really cool stuff to help your company. But it's been internal. Now we're finally seeing with the innovation of these data cloud platforms, so that these innovations that will allow the data warehouse to become sort of front and center in a company and actually more run the company directly off the data warehouse. So I think I'm excited to see where that goes. I mentioned reverse ETL earlier. That's the beginnings of this trend where you're going to have all these operational applications getting fed data from the data warehouse directly because it's the only single source of truth for that data. And it's the most up-to-date place for that data. So starting to feed your systems off that and run your company off the data warehouse is really interesting. And then the future of that is, whole applications will be built directly off the data warehouse as well. So I'm really excited to see how that evolves and where that goes, because there's so much potential here to eliminate waste and friction and moving data around and using data that it could really, I think that's the innovation. Snowflake has a feature that'll allow you to share data between two data warehouses without ever moving it. And that kind of innovation where you don't have to build a data pipeline anymore to do something is huge. And it's the same thing again for having applications just query the data where it is and not have to ship it out to the application. Just has a lot of promise for efficiency and leapfrogging where we are now with leveraging data. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah. Reverse ETL is a term I've heard a little bit over the last few years, but I've never really understood it. So are you sort of suggesting there that it will empower a proliferation of new applications that we never really thought were possible? Is that sort of the big outcome from that?
That absolutely. But even your traditional applications, it's just the way they're architected. So having them directly pull data from a data warehouse rather than their own data store. So I'll give you a really simple example. With sports teams, they'll have a CRM, let's say it's Salesforce. And without a data warehouse, they often have a duplicate problem with their fan base. So they might have 5 records in a Salesforce for the same person. And they don't really know it because they've sold tickets in various channels and, there's no single source of truth and there's no single ID for that person. So one of the things we do for teams is we dedupe all that and we do create a golden record of the fan, right? So we'll take all this data from multiple systems, we'll match it all together, we'll clean it, we'll make sure we have the best information, for the fan. And then we're going to want to serve that back up into Salesforce so that Salesforce has a clean record. So that's a simple example of taking a data modeling process really in a warehouse, coming up with a clean record, and then just copying that back into Salesforce. So Salesforce is now starting to rely on data warehouse really for its source of data rather than the other, sources it had previously.
Right. So yeah, so Salesforce doesn't really Am I right? It doesn't really have the functionality to do a lot of that cleaning inbuilt into the technology. So you got to extract it out, clean it up, and then pump it back in.
Yeah, and it's more than that. It doesn't have the functionality. That's true, but also we're taking other data sources that are not in Salesforce. Like we'll have information about concession stand purchases from a customer, or their interaction with the website, or purchasing merchandise through Fanatics. There's all these different data sources. So we're using those as well to merge all this data together. So it's just data that's not even in Salesforce to begin with.
Right. Got it. No, okay. Makes complete sense. And so, I guess a couple of final questions. What's your, why do you think Snowflake is so successful and popular at the moment? I mean, it's just sort of grown exponentially over the last couple of years. Like, what's your take on it? Why would you use them above, say, AWS or Azure?
Yeah, and this is what I love about my job and our company. We're really technology neutral at the end of the day. We'll just take best in class tools that are out there, and if a new vendor comes along and they've really innovated, we're going to start using that vendor. That was what happened with Snowflake. When we started, we were doing a lot of Amazon Redshift, BigQuery, and Snowflake came along, and Snowflake took away all of the technical headaches of running a data warehouse away. They handled all of it. They handled all the things a DBA or a database administrator would normally have had to deal with. Everything from how much storage you need to plan for, what kind of compression approaches do you want to have, how do you tune performance, all these things that took a lot of energy to figure out, and they made it dead simple. So you could literally just start. There was no planning needed, right? You could just spin up a Snowflake instance, start putting data in it. You knew it was going to scale indefinitely. And then the second piece was separating out compute from storage. So the fact that I could have this one data set, but spin up different compute clusters for different sets of users or different products, and they're all querying the exact same data, but they're using different CPUs, so there's no conflict. And so you could scale indefinitely from a end user, number of concurrent users kind of problem. And that's always been the bane of data warehouses and these systems in general, has been performance, especially with both query performance and concurrency of users using the system at the same time. And Snowflake got rid of those problems in a very easy way. So it just made it dead simple to just, if you ever hit a scaling wall, just spin up a new compute cluster and move some processes over there and you're done, So it made that really, really easy. And then all these other things kind of, came from that was so nice. Like, so for instance, in a Snowflake data warehouse, we'll hook up our ETL tool. Let's say it's dbt or again, 5-trimethylene, and we'll have them using a certain compute node. And then we'll have the BI tool like Sigma Computing using another compute node. So your ETL is not, competing for resources with your end users. And you can see how much processing power exactly is used for each one of those. So you can sort of tune performance, you can tune costs even because it's all usage-based pricing. So it just made all that really, really nice. That was the innovation. And then finally, I'll just mention on top of that is just this promise of what you can do with the cloud, this data sharing capability where you can take two different companies, if they're all both on Snowflake, with a kind of a flip of a switch, they can expose a couple tables and it immediately looks like it's in your other data warehouse and it's just there and you can query it as if it's in your data warehouse. That's what cloud can do. You can only do that in cloud.
Yeah. And I've seen them market that as well. Do you feel like that, that could be one of the next big innovations is sort of, unleashing your data out, like selling access to your data assets and sort of Snowflake making that easy?
Oh yeah. I mean, Snowflake has big plans. They've got a marketplace. They have partners, selling data sets because you can do that. Exactly. You just, with a flip of the button, you can say, you purchased this data set. Here it is instantly. So you don't have to pipe it in. You don't have to build a pipe, Yeah, it's amazing. Snowflake's really going for the ecosystem approach. So they're really trying to be almost the iPhone of data. They'll have apps, they'll have storage, they'll have all the tools you need, and it'll be a whole ecosystem. I think that's where they're going to go. But it's going to be fascinating to see how how the rest of the cloud providers, provide similar, environments and where that goes. It's going to be interesting.
Because there's no doubt that it's sort of like the data is the underpinnings of a lot of innovation that is going on right now, right? And will continue to be. And the ease in which you can access different types of data sets to me feels like that's going to create exponential innovation and creativity across a wide spectrum of things that we can't even imagine right now. It's kind of like how oil and derivatives of oil spawned lots of different industries and opportunities for collective growth. Like that to me is, if we really wanted to, try to be quite visionary, I think that is what could really drive that.
Yeah, I love that. You're right. I think you're right. Making the data available to the masses, and making it easy to use, and then just sky's the limit, right? On how you can use it. Sure.
Yeah, it's almost like I always refer to. Data really is becoming like a commodity. It is a commodity, right? Like it is something that can be distilled into lots of different things, into an application, into a piece of analysis, into like a recommendation engine. It's just like sort of endless. It's kind of just like a refinery, an oil refinery or a commodity refinery, right? Like there's lots of different ways that you can, with oil extracts, you create any number of products that we didn't even know that's sort of the underpinnings of it, right? And that's the same with what I see with data now, and certainly in the future. Just being able to extract very interesting data sets and turn it into something.
You're right. We've seen the first wave of that, right? With the sharing economy, with Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, and they wouldn't exist without these massive data sets and the technology that we have today. So we're going to see a lot more of that. I think you're right.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, well, look, we've been going an hour. It's been a really fascinating conversation, Aron. Maybe we can finish like how to use it. How can our listeners find you and learn more about you, and maybe get in contact if they have something interesting to chat about? How about that?
Oh yeah, sure. So our website is the place to go. dataclymer.com, spelled CLYMER. That's my last name. I used it because the domain was available and it kind of made sense. It worked pretty well. And if you go to dataclymer.com/podcast, you'll see a list of some of the podcasts that we've done, including this one. Check out the site. There's lots of information right there.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on, Aron. And look, I've really enjoyed just chatting away and getting to know you and learning a little bit more about some of the interesting things you're working on, because it's really is quite fascinating, some of the clients you're working with. So yeah, congrats on what you've done so far. It's I'm sure we'll very likely cross paths in the near future. Just the trajectory that the industry we're in is on, really.
Yeah, I hope we do. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and really appreciate your being part of the community and for taking advantage of all these great discussions that we're having on this podcast. So look forward to many more. Thanks again, Aron, and all the very best, everyone. Okay, take care.